Hello everyone, I'm Aaron, a breeding naturalist. Welcome back to another video. Today, I want to share island foxes. The island gray fox is an endemic species to the Channel Islands, meaning that it's found here and nowhere else. It's a very rare mammal, in part because of its small range, and also because of some of the impacts of introduced species and sort of land practices and pesticides that we'll get into in a minute. So this fox probably diverged from the mainland gray fox about 7,000 years ago. So somehow, either by rafting across from the mainland, California, or by being brought across by native peoples, a group of foxes ended up here in these islands. And then they started to diverge. They started to become sort of their own special thing, since there was really no genetic mixing between these foxes that were now on the island and all of their offspring, and all the foxes on the mainland and everything that was going on there. And so they did. They began to evolve, and they began to sort of become their own special thing. One thing that happened was they got smaller. The island gray fox is about 25% smaller than the mainland gray fox. And this is an example of island dwarfism. Oftentimes on islands, as species diverge and become their own species, odd things happen with size. So island dwarfism and island giantism are actually fairly common things that you see happening on islands. And so the gray foxes are a great example of island dwarfism, where the species, in part maybe because of what they were eating, in part maybe because they didn't have any natural predators to become big and defend against, whatever the reasons, they got smaller. And so now they're these almost house cat sized little foxes that are really fun to hang out with. Now, while being on the smaller side, they are actually the largest native terrestrial predator on the island, which is kind of fun. They eat all sorts of things. They are definitely generalists. So they eat lots of mammals, they eat insects, they eat some fruits, they eat birds when they can get a hold of them, they'll eat reptiles like lizards. They will even forage along the coastline, eating like crabs and other marine invertebrates, stuff like that. They'll also scavenge from humans. They like a lot of human food, and so they will take food from campers and the like when they get the chance. Behaviorally, island gray foxes are generally monogamous. So two adult foxes find each other and decide, hey, you know what? You're my fox. And those two will sort of mate for life and defend a territory year round. And they're both very involved. Both male and female are both very involved in caring for young. Usually litters of pups are between 2 and 3. And the female will give birth to them down in a den underground. And as I said, both adults will do a lot of the care, including after the pups leave the den. Sometimes for several months afterwards, both parents are involved in bringing in food, defending against threats, generally teaching these baby foxes how to be island gray foxes. Now, let's talk about their conservation for a little while, because in the early 2000s, late 90s and early 2000s, the numbers of island gray foxes dropped quite precipitously. They dropped to the point where there were only 135 individuals found on Santa Cruz Island, where I am, only 15 individuals on San Miguel Island, and only 14 individuals on Santa Rosa Island. And that was it. That was the total population of island gray foxes that were left. Now, what brought them to that low point? Well, really a combination of things. One was that on the island, a bunch of pigs got released and they went feral, and so they became quite a extensive feral pig population. Those pigs, pigs root around through the soil, very damaging for dens. They just very damaging to the environment in general, and the habitat suffered, and the island gray foxes suffered right along with them. Another issue that happened was DDT. In the 50s and 60s in particular, and 70s, DDT was a chemical that was used extensively to control a wide variety of different insects. And so it was applied liberally across the US. And it had some rather deleterious effects. It impacted, in particular, when it comes to birds, eggshell thicknesses. So remember, these things weren't, this pesticide wasn't being sprayed on birds specifically. It was being sprayed on insects. But it did something called bioaccumulate, which means that, if each insect was hit by a piece of DDT, a bird would eat several different insects, and so would tend to get more DDT in its system. And then if another animal ate that bird or ate several birds, it would get even more DDT in its system. And the same thing happened across lots of different bird species. And what would result is that when there was a high enough DDT concentration in a bird's tissue, the eggs that it laid would have very thin shells. And so when the female went to incubate those eggs, they would just break. And so reproductive success really plummeted for many species. One of those species was the bald eagle. And a side effect of that was, with the bald eagle numbers dropping, that included out here in the Channel Islands. Basically, the entire bald eagle population disappeared from the island, which left this open niche. There were no eagles here of any kind. And golden eagles, which were not as impacted by DDT as bald eagles, golden eagles eventually found the islands, realized that there were all these feral pigs, and golden eagles like to eat feral piglets. And so the golden eagles found this unoccupied chunk of land with an abundant food source, no competition. They set up shop. And so there was a pretty significant golden eagle population out here. And one of the side effects of that was that while they weren't eating piglets, they would also eat island foxes. And so this combination of the feral pigs messing up the habitat and having golden eagles here eating the pigs and also the foxes meant that the island fox population really, really dropped. In about 1999 or so, the late 90s, an extensive effort was put in place to remove all the feral pigs from the Channel Islands. That was successful. And also to trap and capture and relocate all the golden eagles from the Channel Island. And that was also successful. So today, we now have a situation where there are no golden eagles on the island. There are no feral pigs on the island. Bald eagles have come back to the island because as the US has banned the use of DDT, and DDT has sort of worked its way out of many parts of the ecosystem, many bird populations have rebounded really well. The bald eagles among them. So there's now a much healthier bald eagle population than there used to be, and they have rediscovered the Channel Islands, and so now there's several nesting pairs on the islands. And so with that, the habitat has started to recover, and the island gray foxes have recovered quite a bit as well. There are now something like 8,000 island gray foxes on the various islands of the Channel Islands National Park, which is a wonderful recovery, and they are really, really amazing animals, and it's a really wonderful recovery story. When we humans kind of take responsibility for what we've broken and work to fix it, it works, and everything else benefits. All the native species, both plants and animals, benefit from that work. So the Channel Island gray fox is a wonderful success story in that they are really adorable, really charming little animals to hang out with. They are amazingly tolerant of us humans. They really don't care very much. And this is another thing that you see on islands often. Since on islands, there are often not a lot of predators and not a lot of humans for, evolutionarily long spans of time. When humans do show up on islands, often the animals that are there don't have any kind of inherent instinctive fear of humans. So they're perfectly willing to just kind of hang out. And the island foxes, they're just perfectly willing to just sort of hang out. We were able to watch some of their babies at a den, and the babies and the adults didn't seem to care about the humans at all. They're wandering around, passing you on trails, just walking right past you on a trail, barely give you a second thought. They wander around the campgrounds. They're really, really tame, which means you can get really close to them, which is great as long as no one really messes with them. But, in a national park, the wildlife is pretty well protected. So not only are the island gray foxes a wonderful example of island dwarfism, not only are they an example of a conservation success story, not only are they an example of a lovely charismatic megafauna, they're also an example of why it's so important to have places like national parks, places that set aside land, protect it, yes, allow visitors, but also enforce a level of respect and responsibility to the landscape and to the other inhabitants that are hanging out here. So, protect our national parks. They are fantastic national treasures that we all have. I hope you've enjoyed this video on the island gray fox. I hope that you've enjoyed some of the footage I was able to capture of these wonderful little animals and learn something about not only the gray foxes, but the islands in general. As always, thank you very much for the view. Subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and until next time, enjoy the natural world.